All right, welcome to Ghettofication. I'm Jayson Cross, and today I'm here with Ana Hernandez. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Ana is a speech language pathologist. Can you explain that to the listeners?
Yes, so that is everything having to do with communication, cognition, how you pronounce your words, how you eat. It's a really wide spectrum of stuff that we take care of, and I don't think people understand how wide of a spectrum that is.
So, what kind of disorders would you cover? Do you cover?
I cover a bit of everything that's childhood related, but I am hyper focused on stuttering, and I'm hyper focused on stuttering in adults, which is it's rare to focus on stuttering, and it's extra rare to focus on stuttering in adults.
Is speech language pathology a skill you can turn off? Because I was really nervous about this interview because I knew she's going to say, ooh.
So
I need answers.
I think a lot of people mention that when they meet me, they say, "Oh, am I talking okay?" And unless there's something blatantly disordered, I don't care. I really don't care. It's natural for us to have accents. It's natural for us to have different dialects. That's all okay.
So, you don't care, but you are judging.
You caught me there.
I'm going to put you on the spot early.
I should have known.
First, I also want to say congratulations on your success. AdultStuttering.com is 3 years.
Yeah.
Has been around for 3 years. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So I own Adult Stuttering. It's a speech therapy practice that's focused on adults who stutter. That's really rare, and I actually came up with it around the pandemic. So I think right before I met you, about a year before maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. It was around pandemic times, and I ran into two different people who stuttered. They both came to me, and they knew I was a speech therapist, and they said, "Hey, I stutter, and I want to find a speech therapist to see me, but they just had doors closed in their faces left and right, because strangely enough, even though the only person you can really turn to is a speech therapist, very few speech therapists know how to go about stuttering. And there are a lot of misconceptions related to how to go about stuttering, even among speech therapists."
Can you explain exactly what stuttering is?
Yeah, it is a neurophysiological difference, and it really is. I encourage anyone to look up a functional MRI of someone just talking. And if you see the lips, the pharynx, the throat, everything that goes on just to talk, it is hyper fast and hyper precise movements that have to happen. So really, it's complicated, and your brain has to, take the information from its environment, take the information from whatever someone just said to you, especially if it's really complicated or emotionally charged, whatever it might be. It has to take all that information, formulate the idea of the response, and then has to make the motor plans to execute how all those sounds are going to be made.
Okay.
So when those motor portions are being executed, if they're a little bit different, if there's any glitch there, then that's what happens. That's what turns into what we recognize as stuttering.
So is the glitch more neural or physical or structural? Both.
Both, yeah.
Which is the most, well, first off, how common is stuttering?
Good question. So we used to think that it was 1% of the population. That's an undercount. Now we're finding that it's closer to 2%. I think a lot of people, I've actually met multiple people who describe what's going on with them, and I say to them, yeah, like that's what you're describing, a stutter. And they say, no, I don't stutter. And okay, that's fine, but you actually do. Even people who stutter sometimes don't identify as being a person who stutters because it's so stigmatized, and that's really unfortunate.
Is there a hierarchy of stuttering? Like, we all know the one, that's very visible,
The repetition.
I don't want to do it and then get canceled. But yes, that. But is there, like, what would be the base? Like,
So Actually, when it comes to stuttering, the only thing that's consistent about stuttering is that it's inconsistent.
Hmm.
So a person who stutters, the frequency, the intensity, the types will naturally vary with time and per situation, per audience. There are a million factors that can play into why it's going to vary. But what's natural is for it to vary. And while it's a different way of talking, it sounds different. And that part isn't the disorder, that's just a difference. It's a different way of talking, and it's okay and it's valid.
Okay.
What becomes a disorder is that people who stutter very often feel like they can't express themselves without being judged. And very often, especially among the people that I've met with, very often they're concerned that people won't take them seriously or will think of them as less intelligent, when stuttering has nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with capacity, nothing to do with anything related to what would make a person more or less.
When you treat a patient, do you also treat them how to deal with the stigma that goes along with stuttering?
Yeah. So something that was very common in stuttering therapy for the longest time was counting how many stutters were there and how intense they were, how long they lasted, what type they were. And I tell my clients when we begin, I say, we will take one speech sample, and this is all that we'll ever take in therapy. Because the stutter isn't what we're here to quote unquote fix. What we're here to work on is how it affects your life, how it affects your mental health, and what it stops you from doing.
Is stuttering curable?
Stuttering is forever.
It's forever.
Yeah.
On average, how long does it take to improve?
So stuttering by nature is going to vary. It's never going to go away. It takes a big toll on the person. It takes a big toll on their mental health to try to hide it. So instead we focus on them feeling free enough to say what they want to say. Very often what happens is that a person who stutters will, instead of enjoying the connection of a conversation, focusing on the conversation, they will be thinking ahead to what words they might stutter on and what words to use instead so that they don't stutter. Or if you're sitting in a situation, they might be thinking of an exit strategy. So really, that A is exhausting. B, you're kind of living in fight and flight mode chronically, and that is not good for you.
It sounds like there's a link between anxiety and stuttering. Is there, or?
Absolutely, absolutely.
It always, or more than likely?
It's there if the person has had enough negative experiences. So by the time someone is an adult, it's very, very common. It's very common for there to be that anxiety and those what we call avoidance behaviors or avoidances. And really that's the only time that stuttering is a problem, is if it's taking a toll on your quality of life and a toll on your mental health.
In a situation like that, would stuttering be the root problem or the secondary or the tertiary problem?
So, good use of tertiary. I haven't heard that in a while.
Oh, I've been waiting to get some of these words out. Oh my, are you sure you're not a comedian too?
I'm not.
Oh,
I
God.
laugh at my own jokes too often to do that, and people...
That's how it starts.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Would someone stutter and that's why they have anxiety, or would someone have anxiety and that's why they stutter?
Ah.
Yes.
So
Or would it be something tertiary?
So people who stutter absolutely do not stutter because they're nervous or because they forgot what they were going to say. It's nothing related to that. The way that their brain works naturally is just that they stutter. And with time, that anxiety can develop. Stuttering is a different way of talking. It's valid. It's okay. The problem isn't that people who stutter are bad speakers. The problem is that we live in a society of bad listeners.
Oh, I like that. Look, I like how you flipped it right there.
Yeah.
I will say now, I feel like people are more empathetic. Is it becoming less and less of a stigma now? In your opinion?
We have a long way to go. I think things are getting a bit better. I know on the speech therapy side, research is getting better, and we're working hard to get the word out, but I will still sometimes surprise other speech therapists with what I teach them as far as how we go about it now. It still is like not very commonly known. Actually, among the very wide range of things that you'll see a speech therapist for, most speech therapists are the most uncomfortable with stuttering.
Wow.
I know.
Why is that?
Because it was so mysterious for so long and very traditionally, kind of like with the King's Speech, which is not, it's not the best example of speech therapy, and it's not the best example for stuttering at all, but they're working to hide his stutter, and they're working on having him use strategies to speak as smoothly as possible. The problem with those strategies is that they are exhausting to use all the time. They take a lot of mental energy, and if you're really focused on using those strategies so that you will sound as smooth as possible, then you're exhausted and they're really not consistent anyway. It's not a matter, here's another big reason why they're just not healthy. It's not a matter of if one of those strategies is going to fail, it's a matter of when. And we tell people, the old way of doing therapy for stuttering was that you would tell people, hey, if you practice hard enough, then you can use this all the time and get really good at it, and then you never have to stutter openly again. But what we're really telling a person is that, oh, well, if you're still stuttering, you're not working hard enough. And that's not fair. It's not fair. If we multitask too much or put too much stress on our brain, then we're seeing that there's actually smaller levels of gray matter in MRIs.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And that's from overtaxing the brain.
Yeah. Multitasking is really bad for us. We're not actually doing two things at a time. We're just shifting our attention from one thing to the other, and probably doing both worse than if we were just focusing on one.
Can you tell the people about the services that you provide at Adult Stuttering?
Yeah, so I do speech therapy for adults who stutter. I really specialize in teens and adults. And going back to that story, you know, those two people that came to me, most speech therapists didn't know how to work with stuttering, and then especially did not know how to work with adults. Stuttering is lifelong, yet most speech therapy practices are so pediatric focused. So dignity is a really big pillar of adult stuttering. You should be able to go to speech therapy and have it be dignified. Everything that I do with adult stuttering, I always think to myself, what exactly would I want? So I do speech therapy for Illinois and Texas, and that's all for virtual. There are plenty of support groups out there, but I think for stuttering to really feel super normal, you know, we don't always want to sit in a circle and talk about something that's burdening us. That's very helpful, and there's a place for that, but there needs to be a place where you can just go. There are other people who happen to stutter, and everyone's just hanging out. And that's why I created something called Green Social that we have here in Chicago. And that's it. You come and hang out. I joke that it's kind of like Fight Club. You don't have to talk about stuttering. You can. The only difference is, please no fighting, obviously. And also, you don't have to talk about stuttering. You can if you want. You don't have to. You can just come and feel, I guess, quote unquote, normal.
Is it sort of a mixer or a networking event? How would you categorize it?
Kind of like a happy hour. You can buy a drink, you can buy a coffee. That's up to you. You don't have to. You're just there to hang out.
And for those in Chicago, how can they find out about Green Social or where Green Social is located?
There's an email list, adultstuttering.com, or my Instagram is adultstuttering. I'm very creative with my addresses, I guess. But that's also why I named it Adult Stuttering. If people who are adults were having a hard time finding services for stuttering, and especially because they were adults, well then let's call it exactly that and say to them, hey, this is literally made for you.
What would you say to an adult that stutters?
I just want them to know that, hey, I want to hear you talk. What you have to say matters. I know it doesn't always feel like that, but I promise you that your family members, the people who love you, also want to hear you talk. They want to hear what you have to say. And I really hope that you can start to shift the focus into you being in a situation where you always get to say what you want to say. That's the goal.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.